There is a kind of tired that sleep cannot fix. My mother used to describe it to me when I was still small enough to sit on her lap. She called it the tired of people who carry more than their share of the world, the ones who wake up before the sun and go to bed long after it, not because anyone made them, but because they cannot look the other way. She said you could always recognize those people by their hands, not by how worn they were, though they were worn, but by the way they moved, quick and certain even when the body behind them was running on empty. Clara Mendoza had hands like that. She was 34 years old and she had been the only nurse at the San Isidro Rural Health Clinic for the last 6 years. The clinic sat at the edge of a small farming village 3 hours from the nearest city. A low white building with a tin roof that drummed like applause every time it rained, peeling paint the color of old teeth, and a hand-painted sign above the door that someone had repainted twice because the sun kept bleaching the letters away. There were 2 examination rooms, 1 bathroom that worked most of the time, a storage closet where the medicines were kept under lock and key, and a waiting area with 11 plastic chairs, 6 of which were cracked. On the wall above the reception desk, someone had taped a child's drawing of a nurse holding a heart, and underneath in crayon the words, Gracias, Clara. Clara had kept that drawing for 4 years. The village of San Isidro had about 2,000 people, mostly farmers and their families. The kind of people whose hands were also worn, whose days started before the sun, who came to the clinic with fevers they had ignored for a week because they could not afford to stop working. They came with children who coughed through the night, and old men whose joints had been swelling slowly for years, and young mothers who had nowhere else to go when something went wrong with a pregnancy at 3 in the morning. Clara saw all of them. She triaged, she diagnosed, she administered, she counseled. She filled out forms and chased down supply deliveries and called the city hospital when something was beyond what the clinic could handle. She did the work of 3 people every single day because there were never 3 people. There was only her. If this story is already finding its way into your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to Mama Told Me, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from. Mama always said kindness travels farther than you think. The clinic's assigned physician was a man named Dr. Rodrigo Vargas. He was 49, heavy-shouldered, with the kind of face that had probably been handsome once, but had curdled over the years into something that looked permanently annoyed. He drove up from the town of Bogtas every Tuesday and Thursday in a silver car that was always clean, no matter how muddy the road was. He spent those 2 days sitting behind his desk, seeing the patients who had private insurance or enough cash to pay his unofficial consultation fee, and in dismissing the rest with a prescription written so quickly the pen barely touched the paper. Clara had learned in her first month not to argue with him in front of patients. She had learned in her second month not to argue with him at all, not because she agreed with him, but because she had seen what happened when she pushed back. The medicine delivery would be delayed. The air conditioning unit in the storage room that kept certain vaccines cold would suddenly stop being a priority for repair. Her overtime forms would go missing in the regional health office for weeks at a time. She had a son. His name was Miguel. He was 9 years old and he had his father's eyes, dark and quick, and full of something that had not yet been disappointed by the world. Miguel lived with Clara's mother in the city, 2 hours away, because the village had no good school, and Clara could not bear to watch him grow up in the shade of a future that had already been decided for him. She sent money every 2 weeks, not always enough, more than she had. She called every night at 7, and Miguel would hold the phone up to show her his homework, and she would pretend to check it even though the screen was usually too blurry to read properly, and they would both laugh at the pretending. She had not seen him in 6 weeks. She had not taken a day off in 11. That was the texture of her life, the specific weight of it. Not dramatic, not a story anyone would tell. Just the arithmetic of a woman who had decided that this place, this clinic, these 2,000 people mattered, and that as long as she was standing, she would not let them fall through the cracks. And on the morning that everything changed, Clara arrived at the clinic at 6:15, an hour and 45 minutes before it officially opened. The air outside still had the cool, damp quality of very early morning, the sky the purple-gray of old bruises before they turn yellow. She unlocked the front door, and the smell of the clinic settled around her immediately. Antiseptic and old plastic and something faintly sweet from the mango tree that pressed against the side window. She had brought that smell home with her so many times that she sometimes smelled it in dreams. She turned on the lights, checked the cold storage, logged the overnight emergency line messages, 3 calls, one child with a high fever whose parents had driven her to the city after Clara advised them to, one man asking if the clinic had insulin available today, and one message left in silence, just breathing, then a click. She noted all 3 in the logbook. She put water on to boil for the coffee she would not have time to finish. She laid out the triage supplies. She unlocked the medicine cabinet, counted the remaining stock against last week's inventory, and wrote down 7 items that needed to be reordered before Wednesday. She noted that the pain reliever supply was dangerously low. Again, she had submitted 3 reorder requests in the last month. 2 had gone unanswered. One had come back with a note from the regional health office saying that her projected usage numbers seemed inconsistent with the expected patient load for a facility of this size, and that they would require documentation before releasing additional stock. She stared at that note every time she opened the cabinet. She had documented. She would document again. She would keep documenting until her fingers wore down to the bone, if that was what it took. By 7:30, 3 patients were already waiting outside. By 8, when she opened the doors, there were 9. By 8:45, the chairs were full, and 2 women were standing near the door with small children pressed against their legs. Clara moved through all of them. A baby with an ear infection, flushed and crying, her mother barely 20 and terrified. Clara held the baby while the mother filled out paperwork, talked her through everything, slow and clear, the way her own mother had once talked her through fear. A farmer with a gash on his forearm that he had wrapped himself with a strip of t-shirt. She cleaned it, sutured it, told him the next time it should be cleaned immediately, and not after 2 days. He nodded, embarrassed, grateful. An elderly woman with blood pressure so high, Clara felt her own heart spike when she read the numbers. She kept her calm, adjusted the medication, explained exactly why the sodium in the dried fish the woman ate every day was part of the problem, and did it gently, without making her feel ashamed of a diet that poverty had made necessary. She did not stop moving until 11. Dr. Vargas arrived at 11:15, which was 45 minutes late, even by his own unhurried standard. He parked his silver car, walked in without greeting anyone in the waiting area, and went directly to his office. Closed the door. Clara heard him on the phone for 20 minutes before he emerged, straightened his tie, and looked at the clipboard she had left on his desk with the day's remaining patients. Or he flipped through it. "I have a meeting in Bagtas at 3, he said, not looking up. "Move the non-urgents to Thursday." "Half of these people have been waiting since morning," Clara said. "Then they should have come earlier." "They did come earlier. They were waiting for you." He looked at her then, the specific look he had perfected over years, the one that said you are overstepping and you know it. "Thursday," he said. He saw 4 patients in 2 hours, all of them with PhilHealth cards or cash folded in their hands. The others, Clara handled herself. She did what she was legally permitted to do, and occasionally she did what she was not strictly permitted to do, because the alternative was watching someone walk out of the clinic sicker than when they came in, and she had made a decision long ago about which she could live with. At 2:30, Dr. Vargas left for his meeting. Clara sat at the reception desk for exactly 4 minutes, eating half a bread roll and drinking lukewarm coffee. She looked at the 7 items on the reorder list. She looked at the drawing on the wall. She thought about Miguel and his quick dark eyes. She went back to work. He arrived at 3:15, when the afternoon heat had turned the air outside into something you could almost hold in your hands. Clara was in the second examination room, changing the dressing on the gash she had sutured that morning, the farmer having returned because his wife had decided the bandage looked wrong and sent him back. She heard the front door open, heard the sound of someone settling heavily into one of the plastic chairs, heard the small intake of breath that comes with pain that has been carried too long without rest. "Patient in waiting area," she noted mentally. She finished the dressing, told the farmer to come back in 3 days, and walked out. He was in the third chair from the window, a man somewhere in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, though the gray in his hair might have been premature because his face, when she looked at it carefully, still had the structure of someone younger. He was dressed in plain clothes, dark trousers, the kind that had been good once, a simple button-down shirt in pale blue, soft from washing. His shoes were old but clean. He was not wearing anything that suggested wealth or poverty exactly. He looked the way certain people look when they have dressed not to be looked at. He was holding a thin folder on his lap, the kind people brought with their medical records, but it was closed and his hands were resting on top of it loosely. Clara looked at his face. There was a line of sweat at his temple that the fan near the door had not dried. There was the faint pallor of someone who had been unwell for days and was only now admitting it. But more than that, she noticed his eyes. They were taking in the room in a particular way, moving from the cracked chairs to the faded posters on the wall, to the drawer she had not been able to close properly for 3 months because the track was bent, to the hand-painted child's drawing above the desk. Slow and thorough, the way a person looks at something they want to remember exactly as it is. "Good afternoon," Clara said. "I'm Nurse Mendoza. Are you registered with our clinic?" "No," he said. His voice was calm, a little rough, like someone who had not spoken to anyone in a while. "I just arrived. I was told this was the nearest clinic." "From where?" "I was visiting the barangay past the mountain road, Sitio Kaginhawahan." He paused. "I've been having chest tightness for 2 days and some dizziness. I thought I would wait it out, but—" He made a small gesture with one hand that meant here I am. "Right decision to come in," Clara said, already pulling a registration form from the drawer. "Can I get your name?" "Reyes," he said. "Nathan." She wrote it down. She went through the intake procedure the way she always did, thorough and unhurried, even at 3:15 with 2 more patients waiting and the pain reliever supplies she was worried about sitting at the back of her mind. Blood pressure, pulse, temperature. She asked him about his medical history, about current medications, about the specific nature of the chest tightness. Was it sharp or dull? Did it radiate anywhere? Was it worse with physical effort? Did it come and go or stay constant? He answered everything precisely. Too precisely, a small part of her mind registered. The way someone who knows medicine answers medical questions. But she noted it and filed it away without acting on it. Plenty of people did their research before visiting a clinic. Plenty of people arrived already knowing the vocabulary for what they were feeling. "Your blood pressure is slightly elevated," she said, showing him the reading. "Not alarming, but worth watching. Combined with the chest tightness, I want to do an ECG if you're agreeable. The machine we have is basic. Hey, but it will tell us what we need to know." "Of course, sir," he said. She set it up. He sat quietly through it, not fidgeting, not checking a phone. He watched her hands as she attached the leads with the focused, neutral attention of someone who was used to being in medical settings. She noticed that too. The ECG showed no acute abnormality. His rhythm was stable, slightly irregular in a way that could mean many things or nothing at all. She noted it carefully. "I don't see anything that suggests an immediate cardiac event," she said, "but you should not ignore chest tightness that's been going on for 2 days. Are you able to get to a hospital in Bagtas or the city for further evaluation?" "Not today," he said. "Or perhaps tomorrow. Then I want to give you something for the blood pressure and ask you to come back in the morning so we can check again." She paused. "Are you staying nearby?" "At the barangay hall," he said. "They let me use one of the rooms." She nodded. She went to the medicine cabinet and opened it. Stood there for a moment, looking at the inventory. The blood pressure medication they had in stock was not the first-line option she would have preferred, but it was serviceable. She prepared the day's dosage. "The blood pressure medication is from our clinic stock," she said as she brought it to him. "So there's no charge. I'm also going to recommend you rest, drink water consistently, avoid anything salty, and come back first thing tomorrow. If the chest tightness gets significantly worse tonight, especially if it spreads to your arm or jaw, go directly to the hospital in Bagtas. Don't wait." He took the medication and looked at it. "Nurse Mendoza," he said. She looked up. "The last clinic I visited before this one," he said slowly, "the nurse told me I would need to pay 200 pesos before she could take my blood pressure. I didn't have 200 pesos with me." Clara looked at him for a moment. Something in the way he said it, quiet and even, without bitterness or performance, settled somewhere in her chest. "That shouldn't have happened," she said. "No," he agreed. "It shouldn't have." She thought about leaving it there, about moving to the next patient and the next task, the way she had trained herself to move, forward, always forward, was because stopping to feel the weight of what was wrong with the system was a luxury she did not have time for. But something in his face made her stay for one more second. "It won't happen here," she said. He looked at her then. Really looked at her, the way people do when they are checking whether you mean something or only saying it. She held his gaze steadily because she did mean it, had always meant it, had been meaning it for 6 years in this clinic with its cracked chairs and bent drawer track and drawings taped to the wall. "I know," he said quietly. "I can see that." The last patient of the day left at 5:20. The clinic officially closed at 5. Clara locked up at 6:15 after finishing the documentation, restocking the supply trays, and calling the regional office's non-emergency line to follow up on the reorder request. She got a voicemail. She left a detailed message. She had left 12 detailed messages in the last 3 months. On her way out, she stopped at the waiting area and picked up a small water bottle someone had left under one of the cracked chairs. She put it in the trash. She looked at the drawing on the wall for a moment. "Gracias, Ate Clara." She turned off the lights. Outside, the village was settling into evening. The smell of wood smoke from cooking fires, somewhere a radio playing something old and familiar, the far-off sound of children who had not yet been called in. Clara stood at the clinic door for a moment, with her bag on her shoulder and the weight of the day arranged across her body in ways she had learned to work around. She thought about calling Miguel. It was too early. He would still be at his grandmother's table finishing homework. She would call at 7. She counted the hours. She was halfway down the road when she saw the man, Nathan Reyes, sitting on the low concrete wall near the barangay hall. He was looking at the clinic. Not the way a patient looks back at a place they have left, but the way someone looks at something they are thinking carefully about. He had a small notebook open on his knee and a pen in his hand. But he was not writing. He was looking. When he heard her footsteps, he turned. "Going home?" he asked. "Yes. How are you feeling?" "Better than this morning." A pause. "That clinic. How long have you been working there?" 6 years. "Alone?" "There's a doctor 2 days a week." He said nothing for a moment, but she saw something move through his face that she could not name. Not pity, something older and heavier than pity. "The drawing on the wall," he said. "The child's drawing. One of my patients drew it for me. She was 4 years old. She came in with pneumonia. She recovered." "You saved her." Clara shook her head slightly. "I caught it in time." "That's different." He looked at her. Something in his expression was searching for something. The way people look when they are hearing something that matters to them. Something they have been looking for without knowing exactly what form it would take. "Is it always this busy?" he asked. "We're one of 3 clinics serving 4 barangays," she said. "The other 2 have worse supplies and no consistent doctor at all. So yes, it's always this busy." "And the doctor?" "Well, he was not here today when I came. He had a meeting." "How many days a week is he here?" She looked at him. It was a direct question, the kind that could lead somewhere she had long ago learned to be careful around in a village where Dr. Vargas knew the barangay captain and the barangay captain knew everyone. 2 days, she said. "Officially." "And unofficially?" She picked up her bag more firmly on her shoulder. "You should rest," she said. "I'll see you tomorrow morning." She walked on. Behind her, she heard him write something in the notebook. That night, Clara sat on the floor of her small rented room, with her back against the bed and her phone warm in her hand, Miguel's voice filling the space between the walls. "Nanay, we did fractions today," Miguel said. "Moin, I got most of them right." "Most of them?" "Almost all of them." She smiled at the ceiling. "Tell me the ones you got wrong." "No." "Miguel." "3. Only 3. That's very good. Teacher said next week we'll start multiplying fractions, and that's harder. Then we'll practice this weekend." Silence for a moment, the comfortable kind. "Nani, when are you coming?" The question always came. She always had an answer that was technically true and fully insufficient. "When I can take a day, a knock? Soon." "You always say soon." "I know." Another silence. Then, "Are the people there okay? The sick people?" She thought about the baby with the ear infection, the farmer with the gash, the woman with the high blood pressure, the man in the pale blue shirt who had been sent away from a clinic for not having 200 pesos. It's some of them, she said. The ones I can help. You help a lot of them, Miguel said with the simple authority of a 9-year-old who believed things completely. I try. Lola says you work too hard. Lola's right. She also says you get it from Tatai. Clara closed her eyes. Her husband had died 4 years ago. Not dramatically, not in a way that made a story. He had gotten sick, and the clinic near their home at the time had not had the right medicine, and they had not had the money to go further. He had died the way poor people died, not from the sickness alone, but from the distance between the sickness and the care. That was why she was here. That was always why. Lola's right about that too, Clara said quietly. Go finish your homework, Anak. I'll call again tomorrow. Okay, I love you, Nanai. I love you. It's fractions. Nanai. Practice the ones you got wrong. She heard him groan dramatically as he hung up, and she sat with the sound of it for a while after, the small, ordinary gift of a child's groan, before setting her phone down and staring at the wall. He came back the next morning before the clinic opened. She found him waiting on the step at 6:40, his notebook closed on his knee, a small paper bag beside him from the Sari store down the road, 2 bread rolls and what looked like a carton of juice. I brought enough for 2, he said, looking slightly uncertain for the first time since she had met him, as if he was not entirely sure the gesture would land right. She looked at him for a moment. Then she sat down on the step beside him. How was the night? She asked. Quieter than I expected, he said. The chest tightness is less. The dizziness is gone entirely. That's the medication working, but you still need further evaluation. I know. He handed her one of the bread rolls. I also know that you got here at 6:30 this morning, and yesterday you left at 6:15, and I would guess that's roughly your standard day. She took the bread. She ate it without answering, because there was no answer to give that would change anything. He ate too, and they sat in the early light of the village morning, the air still cool, a dog sleeping in the road 20 meters away, the sound of a faraway rooster being answered by a closer one, the ordinary particular music of a place that was alive and struggling and showing up for itself despite everything. Can I ask you something? He said. You've been asking things since yesterday. You haven't objected. She looked at him sideways. What's the question? Why do you stay? She had been asked this before, by her mother, by friends from nursing school who were now in hospitals in the city or working abroad. By Dr. Vargas once, in what she suspected was an attempt to unsettle her rather than genuine curiosity. She gave Nathan Reyes the same answer she gave all of them, because it was true and she had not found a shorter way to say it. My husband died because there was no one close enough to help him in time, she said. I stay because I don't want that to be someone else's story. He was quiet for a long moment. That's a heavy reason to carry, he said. It's a light one, she said. It keeps me from feeling lost. He looked at her. That same searching look she had noticed the day before. The one that felt like he was looking for something specific and finding more than he expected. She noticed again that his eyes moved like someone trained to take in information quickly, that the way he listened had a particular quality, attentive and very still, that she associated with people who spent a lot of time inside rooms where careful attention was the difference between one outcome and another. She noticed it, and she filed it away again, and she stood and picked up her keys. Come inside, as she said. I'll take your blood pressure before the patients arrive. He followed her in. Standing in the second examination room, while she wrapped the cuff around his arm, he looked at the wall where a faded chart showed the standard vaccination schedule. It was 2 years out of date. When he looked at the supply shelf, at the gaps where certain medications should have been. He looked at the examination table with its cracked vinyl cover, the tear repaired with medical tape that had browned with age. He looked at all of it the way he had looked at the clinic from the road the evening before, slow and thorough and careful. 130/84, she said. Still slightly elevated but coming down. You should eat something with your medication, not after. She nodded at the bag. Finish the other bread roll. Yes, ma'am, he said. She looked up. Something in the way he said it, not sarcastic, not performative, genuinely compliant, like someone who was in a room they respected, made her stop. "Are you a doctor?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Why do you ask?" "The way you answered my intake questions, the way you look at things in here, are the way you're looking at that vaccination chart right now." He was quiet for a moment. She held the look, not pressing, just waiting. "No," he said finally, "I'm not a doctor." She nodded slowly. She did not entirely believe him, but she did not push. There were many reasons a person might not want to be exactly who they were in a place they had just arrived at, and most of them were harmless. She had learned that from 6 years of watching people come through a door they had never come through before, trying to find words for things their bodies had been keeping quiet too long. She handed him the medication. "I want you back at 3 o'clock today," she said. "Not tomorrow. Today." 3 o'clock, he said. He was there at 2:45. The morning that cracked everything open arrived like ordinary mornings always do, without announcement, wearing the plain face of a day that looked like all the others. It was a Thursday, which meant Dr. Vargas was scheduled to be in. He arrived at 11:50, which was even later than usual, and when he came through the door, he was already on his phone, already not looking at the waiting room where 7 people had been sitting for varying amounts of time, already moving toward his office with the particular walk of a man who considered arrival sufficient. "Dr. Vargas," Clara said from the desk. He stopped. "I need to talk to you about the reorder request. We're completely out of—" "Not now, Mendoza. I have calls to make. We've been out of amoxicillin for 4 days. I've had to turn away 3 children with confirmed ear infections and send them to Bagtas. Then send them to Bagtas. Bagtas is an hour and 40 minutes each way. For families here, that's a full day of work lost and a fare they can barely— This clinic does not have the budget to stock everything. That is a regional office issue, not mine. Send an email." "I have sent 11 emails." He looked at her then, with the particular exhaustion of a man who found her exhausting. "Mendoza, I'm going to give you some advice I have given you before. Stop treating this like a city hospital. You are in a barrio. Manage expectations. Your patients do not come here expecting miracles. Don't promise them something this clinic cannot be." He walked into his office and closed the door. Clara stood at the desk. And she stood there for 3 seconds exactly. She counted them without meaning to, the same way she had been counting things that had nowhere to go for 6 years. Then she turned to the waiting room. "Who's first?" she said. Nathan Reyes was in the 4th chair. She had not seen him come in. He had arrived quietly as he did everything, and he was sitting with his notebook closed on his knee and his eyes on the closed door of Dr. Vargas's office. His face was still, but his jaw was set in a way it had not been set the 2 previous days, and his eyes had a quality that she recognized, not anger exactly, but the particular controlled sharpness of someone who has seen something they needed to see and is now deciding what to do with it. Wait, she held his gaze for just a second as she called the next patient's name. He looked back at her. In that look was something she could not yet name, but would understand later. The look of a man who had come somewhere with a question and had just found an answer he had not expected, one that went far deeper than anything he had prepared himself for. She turned and led the patient into the examination room. Behind the closed door of the office, Dr. Vargas was still on the phone. In the waiting room, Nathan Reyes opened his notebook. He began to write. By the end of that Thursday, Clara had seen 14 patients. Dr. Vargas had seen 3. He left at 2:40, which was 20 minutes before his scheduled end time, pausing at her desk long enough to drop a prescription pad and say, "Iwa, the rest can come back Tuesday," before walking out into the afternoon with his phone already at his ear and his silver car waiting in the one patch of shade near the clinic entrance. Clara watched him go the way she always watched him go. Steadily, without expression, the way you watch weather that cannot be argued with. She turned back to the waiting room. "I can see 4 more today," she said to the remaining patients. "If you would like to come back Tuesday for the doctor, I understand. If you would like to stay and see me now, I will do everything I'm able to do." Nobody left. She saw all 7. Nathan Reyes waited until the last one had gone. He had not moved from his chair except to make way for other patients. pressing himself to the side when the room was crowded. Winter accepting a child's crayon drawing handed to him by a toddler waiting with her mother with the grave seriousness of a man who understood that a toddler's gift was not to be received carelessly. He held it on his lap for an hour. When the mother and child left, he folded it carefully and put it in his notebook. Clara came out of the examination room and found him still there in the emptied waiting room, the late afternoon light coming through the window at an angle that made the dust in the air look like something deliberate. "You should have gone," she said. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. She sat down across from him, not because she had time to, but because her feet said it was time. She had been on them since 6:15. It was now 4:05. "Ask," she said. He looked at the empty chairs. She went at the bent drawer on her desk that would not close all the way, at the vaccination chart on the wall that was 2 years out of date. She could see him composing something, measuring the words before he released them. "The doctor," he said. "He comes 2 days a week. He sees patients for roughly 2 hours. He leaves early. He turned away the rest of the queue today and told them to come back Tuesday. You then saw all 7 of them yourself." "That's not a question," Clara said. "I'm getting to the question." He looked at her. "Does he always do this?" "He does what he does," Clara said. "That's not an answer." "No," she agreed, "but it's what I'm able to say." He was quiet. He looked down at his notebook, then back up at her. "Who oversees this clinic? Who does the reporting go to?" "Regional Health Office. It's District 4. And the doctor's contract, is it through the regional office or through the municipality?" She looked at him carefully. These were not the questions of a sick man following up on his blood pressure reading. These were the questions of someone who understood organizational structures, who knew what a reporting line looked like and where the pressure points were along it. "Municipal," she said slowly. "He's the municipality's contracted physician. He covers 2 clinics, this one and the one in Barangay Talim. And if something went wrong here, a patient complaint, a documentation irregularity, a shortage of supplies that was reported and ignored, where would that go?" "It would go to the municipal health officer." She paused. "Who is Dr. Vargas's cousin?" Nathan Reyes looked at her for a moment without speaking. Something moved through his face that she had not seen there before. It was not surprise. It was the specific expression of someone who has been gathering information to build a picture, and the last piece has just confirmed the shape they suspected. "I see," he said quietly. "Why are you asking these things?" Clara said. He looked at her with an honesty that she had not expected. No deflection, no smooth redirect, just a direct and steady answer. "Because what I saw today matters," he said, "and I want to make sure I understand exactly what I'm looking at before I do anything about it." She studied him, studied the plain clothes chosen not to be noticed in, the notebook, the precise medical vocabulary, the way he had answered all her intake questions, the way he looked at everything in this clinic as if cataloging it, and the way he had asked today's questions with the fluency of someone who had asked questions like them many times before. She made a decision. "Your blood pressure," she said, standing and picking up the cuff. He held out his arm without being asked. She wrapped it, pumped it, watched the numbers. 128/81, she said. "Better." She unwrapped the cuff and held it in her hands and looked at him. "You're not a patient, are you?" He met her eyes. "I am a patient," he said. "Everything I told you about the chest tightness and the dizziness was true. I have been unwell. You treated me correctly, and I am genuinely grateful. But that is not the only reason I'm here." The room was very still. Outside, somewhere distant, the rooster started again. A child laughed. Not the ordinary sounds of the end of an afternoon in a village that did not know anything was shifting. "Who are you?" Clara asked. He reached into his folder, the thin one she had noticed on the first day, closed on his lap with his hands resting on it loosely. He opened it. He took out a single card and held it out to her. She took it. It was a government identification card, clean and official and absolutely real. The name on it was Nathan Reyes, which was what he had told her. But below his name, in the small text that described his office, was a title that made the air in the room feel different. Office of the Secretary of Health, Special Commission on Rural Health Infrastructure and Standards. Senior Evaluator. Clara looked at the card for a long moment. She looked up at him. You came here to evaluate the clinic, she said. Eat among others in this district, he said. I visit unannounced. I present as a patient. I observe. It gives me a more accurate picture than a scheduled inspection. She set the card on the desk between them. She looked at it lying there in the thin afternoon light, at the seal of the Department of Health pressed into its surface, at the weight of what it represented. 6 years, she thought. 6 years of reorder requests that went unanswered. 11 emails. A vaccination chart 2 years out of date. A drawer that wouldn't close. A doctor who left at 2:40 and counted it as a full day. She looked at Nathan Reyes, who was watching her with the same careful attention he had brought to everything since the first moment she had found him in the third chair from the window. How long have you been evaluating? She said, and her voice came out steadier than she expected. 12 years, he said. I visited over 200 clinics in rural and underserved areas. And what happens after an evaluation? It depends entirely on what's found. He leaned forward slightly. Clara, I've sat in many waiting rooms. I've watched many nurses. What I observed yesterday and today, he stopped, started again. I've sat in waiting rooms where nurses checked the clock and counted patients and moved people through quickly so they could finish on schedule. I've sat in rooms where patients were turned away without documentation. I've sat in rooms where the medicine cabinet held more expired stock than current. I've sat in too many rooms where the nurse knew the system was broken and had simply decided that was the shape of things. And here, Clara said. Here, he said. I watched you suture a farmer's arm and talk to him like he was someone whose name you intended to remember. I watched you sit with a 20-year-old mother and hold her baby while she filled out paperwork because she was shaking too hard to do both at once. I watched you stand at the medicine cabinet this morning and write something down with the face of a person who has been writing things down and watching them disappear for a very long time. And I watched you after a doctor who barely looked at his patients left early and told the rest to come back in 4 days, tell 7 people that you would see them, and then go ahead and see all 7. He paused. I also watched him, he said quietly. Every word, every dismissal. The consultation fee conversation I overheard this morning through the door when Mrs. Aguilar came in and couldn't pay the additional amount he was asking for, and he told her to come back when she had it. The patient who left without being seen. The documentation that I suspect, when I look at it against the billing records, will not add up the way it should. Clara was very still. She had known. She had known all of it, had been knowing it for 6 years, carrying the knowledge the way you carry something that cannot be put down, heavy and constant, until the weight becomes indistinguishable from the weight of being alive. Hearing it said aloud in plain words, by someone from outside the system, by someone with a card from the office of the Secretary of Health sitting on her desk, something in her chest moved that she had been keeping very, very still for a long time. She did not cry. She was not, in the end, a person who cried often, but she felt the particular trembling of something that had been held under pressure for too long, finally being told it was allowed to exist. What happens now, she said. I file my report, he said, a detailed one, and then the commission acts on it. He looked at her. But I need your documentation. The reorder requests, the email records, the patient logs, everything you've kept. Do you have it? I have everything, she said. I have always kept everything. He nodded. Something in his expression shifted, not professional satisfaction, something quieter and more personal. I thought you might, he said. If this story has found its way to you, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story from Mama Told Me. Your support is what keeps these stories alive, and more of them coming your way. She made copies. It took the better part of the next morning. She had kept records the way people keep records when they suspect that one day someone will need to see them, meticulously in dated order, with notes in the margins where the bare records didn't capture the full truth of what had happened. The email chains, the reorder forms, including the one that came back asking for documentation she had already provided. The patient logs that showed the gap between patients Dr. Vargas billed and patients actually seen. Attendance records in the clinic logbook that showed arrival and departure times, which she had taken to noting with particular care in the last 2 years without entirely knowing why. found only that her body understood something her mind had not yet put into words. She gave Nathan Reyes a folder 3 centimeters thick. He sat at the table in the examination room with it open in front of him, reading. He read the way people read, who have read many documents, fast and thorough, but he slowed down at certain pages. She saw him pause at the form that came back from the regional office. She saw him go still at the patient log from 8 months ago, the one that showed 3 consecutive Tuesdays where Dr. Vargas had billed for a full clinic day, and the log showed him present for less than 90 minutes each time. She watched him write. He wrote a great deal, filled 4 pages of his notebook, then started a fifth. He asked her questions as he went. Specific ones with dates attached, with names. She answered all of them. She had the answers. She had always had the answers. Nobody had ever asked. At one point he looked up and found her watching him and said, "Are you worried?" "About what happens to the clinic?" "About what happens to you when this moves forward? Vargas will know it originated here. People like him tend to turn toward whoever they think disrupted their arrangement." She looked at him steadily. "I've been disrupting his arrangement for 6 years without a report behind me. At least now there will be a report." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he wrote something else in his notebook. She went back to her patients. He came every day that week. He was no longer pretending to be only a patient, though he still accepted the blood pressure checks and the follow-up medication with the same quiet compliance, and she still took the readings with the same professional thoroughness because they were a real patient with a real elevated blood pressure, and that did not change because of anything else he was. He sat in the waiting room in the mornings and watched. He wrote. In the afternoons, he sat at the table in the empty examination room and worked through her documentation, occasionally calling someone on his phone in a low voice, occasionally asking her to clarify a date or a name. The village began to notice him. In a place of 2,000 people where the same faces moved through the same days with the regularity of tides, a stranger sitting in the clinic waiting room 5 days in a row was noticed. Old Lolo Fermin, who came in every Tuesday for his diabetes check and knew the name of every person who had ever walked through the clinic door, asked Clara on the third day, "Sino ba yung matanda sa upuan? Who's the old man in the chair?" "A patient," Clara said. "He doesn't look sick," Lolo Fermin said. "Nobody looks sick before they are," Clara said. Lolo Fermin accepted this with the wisdom of a man who had lived long enough to know when he was being given an answer that was technically true. Some of the other regular patients began to talk to him. Unhurriedly, the way village people talk to strangers who have been present long enough to be somewhat trusted. An older woman named Nena, who came in twice a week for wound care, told him about the time the clinic had run out of gauze, and Clara had used strips from her own lab coat without mentioning it to anyone. A farmer named Rudy told him about driving his daughter to Bagtas at midnight because the clinic had been unable to get the antibiotics she needed, and he had been told to wait until Tuesday when the doctor came in, and Clara had called him at 10 o'clock at night to say, "No, don't wait. Go now. I'll tell you exactly what to ask for when you get there." Nathan Reyes wrote all of it down. Clara heard none of these conversations directly. She only knew about them the way you know things in a small place, through the texture of it, through the way Nathan's notebook filled up with pages. You were not through the way the patients looked at him and then back at her with a particular expression she could not quite read until the third day when she finally understood it. They were not confused by his presence. They were glad of it. They had been watching someone carry something heavy for a long time, and they recognized, with the instinct of people who know about weight, that something was finally being done about it. On the fourth day, Dr. Vargas arrived for his Tuesday session. He walked in at 11:35. He did not see Nathan in the corner of the waiting room immediately because he did not look at the waiting room. He went directly to his office, as always. Clara watched from the desk. Nathan Reyes did not move. He sat in his chair with his notebook closed on his knee and his eyes steady. His face was the still, her neutral face he had worn when she first saw him, the face of someone who had chosen not to be noticed. But his jaw was set the way it had been set the Thursday before, and his eyes had the particular quality she now recognized. He was watching. He was noting. He was deciding. At 12:15, Clara knocked on the office door. "The patient in room 2 needs a physician review," she said when Vargas opened it. Mrs. Castillo, she's 62, hypertensive. Her medication isn't controlling her blood pressure adequately. I need a prescription adjustment. Send her to Bagtas. She can't travel. Her son is working. There's no one to take her. That is not a medical reason, Mendoza. Her blood pressure is 165 over 100. That is a medical reason. He looked at her. She held the look. Fine. He picked up his prescription pad. Yes, increase the dose. I'd like you to see her, Clara said, in person. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger. The thing underneath anger. The thing that anger was covering, which was the specific discomfort of a person being asked to do a job they had long ago decided they were above. I am very busy today, he said. You have 3 patients scheduled, Clara said. Mrs. Castillo is not one of them. Then why would I see her? Clara looked at him for a moment. She thought about 6 years, about 11 emails, about the form that came back, about the 20-year-old mother who had been shaking too hard to hold her baby and fill out the forms at once. Because she's sick, Claire said, and you're a doctor, and this is a clinic. The silence that followed was a particular kind of silence. The kind that exists in the space between a thing that has always been true and a person finally saying it out loud without apology. Vargas's face went through several expressions before settling on one she recognized. Contempt with efficiency behind it. The expression of a man recalibrating how much trouble someone was likely to make. I'll see her, he said. 1 minute. He saw her for 4. Clara documented every second of it. From the waiting room, Nathan Reyes could hear the muffled voices through the door of the examination room. He could not hear words, only tones. The flat, efficient tone of a man who was present in body and absent in everything else. The thin, uncertain voice of an older woman who had been spoken to that way often enough that she had stopped expecting more. And beneath both of those, the third voice, a clear and steady and quietly relentless, doing its work. When the patient came out, Vargas went directly back to his office. He did not look at the waiting room. He did not see Nathan. Clara came to her desk and wrote in the log. Date, time, patient, physician present, duration of consultation, outcome. She wrote it all down. When she looked up, Nathan was watching her. She met his eyes. She said nothing. He wrote something in his notebook. The day it broke open was a Friday. Vargas was not there on Fridays. Clara was alone, which was the normal state of Fridays, and she moved through the morning with the ordinary rhythm of a person inside a pattern they know by heart. 8 patients by 10, 3 more by 11:30, a child with a skin infection, an old man with a cough that worried her, a young woman who came in crying and did not have a physical complaint, only the specific kind of pain that has no clinical name, and sat with Clara for 20 minutes while Clara talked to her the way her mother had once talked her through fear. Nathan arrived at 9. He had brought coffee this time, from the small carinderia at the end of the road. 2 cups in paper containers. He set one on her desk without a word and took his seat. She drank it without stopping. At 11, a woman named Leonora arrived. Leonora was 47, and she had been coming to the clinic once a month for a year. She had a kidney condition that required regular monitoring and a medication regimen that needed consistency. Clara knew her the way she knew all her long-term patients, not just her chart, but the specific texture of her, the way she held her hands in her lap when she was anxious, the way she always asked about Miguel, the way she had once brought Clara a portion of her daughter's birthday cake wrapped in foil. Leonora sat down and Clara could see immediately that something was wrong. Not wrong in the acute, alarming way that made Clara move faster. Wrong in the tired, diminished way that made Clara's chest tighten. How long? Clara said. 3 weeks, Leonora said. Maybe more. Why didn't you come sooner? Leonora looked at her hands. The doctor was here last Tuesday. I came. He said I should have a new set of labs before he could review my medication. He said to go to the laboratory in Bagtas. I said I didn't have the money for the fare, and the lab fees both. He said he couldn't help me without the labs. He said come back when I had them. Clara sat very still. He sent you away, she said. He said he couldn't help without the labs. I know labs are important. I'm not saying he was wrong. Leonora stopped. I've been feeling worse every week, and I didn't have the money to go. And I didn't know what else to do except come back and hope. Clara stood up. She went to the cabinet. She pulled out what she needed and began the assessment that should have been done 3 weeks ago. She was thorough and she was fast, and she spoke to Leonora while she worked, the same calm, clear voice she always used, the one that said, "I see you and I'm here, and you are not nothing." But inside, beneath the calm, something was burning. From the waiting room, Nathan heard the tone of it through the door. He heard the particular quality of Clara's voice when she spoke to Leonora, the tautness under the gentleness, the sound of someone managing something that should not need to be managed. He stood up. He walked to the door of the examination room and knocked once. "Is there anything you need?" he said through the door. A pause. "Lab results," Clara said. Her voice was even. "And a doctor who was here 3 weeks ago." He stood at the door for a moment. Then he went back to his chair. He opened his notebook. He did not write slowly this time. That evening, after Leonora had been assessed and treated with what the clinic could provide and referred, with a detailed letter Clara wrote herself, to the city hospital with specific instructions that she hoped someone would read, so Clara sat at her desk in the emptied clinic. She was writing. Not patient notes this time. A letter. To the Regional Health Office, District 4. Addressed not to the general office email that had swallowed 11 of her previous communications, but to the specific name of the regional director, whose contact information she had found after 2 hours of searching government websites 3 months ago and had been keeping in the back of her logbook ever since. She wrote it plainly. She wrote it with dates. She wrote it with names and facts and documentation references. She did not write it with anger, though she felt it. She wrote it the way she had always written things she needed people to actually read, clearly and completely and without any of the softening that asked to be dismissed. She was on the second page when she heard his footstep at the door. Nathan Reyes stood in the doorway of the clinic in the last of the evening light. He was holding his notebook. His shirt was slightly wrinkled now, the careful plainness of his clothing not quite holding its shape after a week. His face had something in it she had not seen before. Not professional concern, something older and less managed than that. "Can I come in?" he said. She gestured at the chair. He sat. He looked at what she was writing. He did not read it from where he sat, but he understood what it was. "Clara," he said. She kept writing. "I need to tell you something," he said. She looked up. He had his identification card on the table again, but he was not looking at it. He was looking at her with the expression of a man who has been carrying something at a slight distance from himself and has just decided to put it down and stand close to it. "My evaluation of this clinic is complete," he said, "and it is the most detailed and most serious report I have written in 12 years of this work." She said nothing. The documentation irregularities, the billing records against attendance logs, the turned away patients, the supply requests that were suppressed. He paused. Mrs. Castillo's consultation on Tuesday that lasted 4 minutes and was billed as a comprehensive review. Leonora's case from 3 weeks ago. His voice was even, but something underneath it was not. "In 12 years, I have written reports that have led to sanctions, to reallocations of supply chains, to contract terminations. I've written reports that have changed things." He looked at her. "I don't think I have ever written one that covered as much ground in, as concentrated a space as this one." "What does that mean?" Clara said. "It means that what I'm going to file when I leave here is not a standard evaluation report," he said. "It goes directly to the secretary's desk. Not through the regional office, not through the district, directly to him." Clara set down her pen. She looked at Nathan Reyes. She looked at the plainness of his clothes and the worn quality of his shoes and the notebook that was now full in the folder of her documentation that he had read front to back. She thought about the first day, his precise answers to her intake questions, the particular way he had looked at everything, the card that said Senior Evaluator. She thought about what senior meant in a title at the office of the secretary. "Who are you?" she said again. Not the same question she had asked before, a different one, a fuller one. He looked at her for a long moment. The searching look he always carried had shifted. He was not searching for something now. He had already found it. He was deciding whether to tell her what he'd found. He reached into his folder a second time, not for the identification card, for something else. A second card, thicker, with a different seal. He placed it on the desk beside the first. She picked it up. The title on this card was not Senior Evaluator. It was 5 words and it rewrote every conversation they had had. Undersecretary, Office of the Secretary of Health. Clara looked at the card. She looked at Nathan Reyes. So she looked at the plain blue shirt and the paper bag with 2 bread rolls from the Sorry Sorry store, and the notebook worn soft from being carried everywhere, and the worn shoes that had walked into this clinic as if they belonged to someone who had nowhere particular to be. "You're the undersecretary," she said. "Yes," he said. "You came here yourself," she said. "Not an evaluator. You." "I come to places myself sometimes," he said, "when the regular evaluation reports suggest something that needs a different kind of attention. When the numbers say one thing, and I need to know what the actual texture of it is." He paused. "I received your 11th email 3 weeks ago. It was forwarded to my office by mistake, through a misdirected chain from the District 4 office. Someone pressed the wrong button, and I read it." Clara was very still. "I had received reports from this district before," he continued. "Standard reports, the kind that get filed and summarized. They said this clinic was functioning within expected parameters for a rural facility." He looked at her. "Your email said something different. It said a child had been sent away with an ear infection because there was no amoxicillin and no one had answered 11 supply requests. It said a 62-year-old woman with hypertension had been told her case was not urgent. It said, man, I'm quoting you exactly because I remember it, that a clinic that functions within expected parameters and sends away sick children is a clinic where the expected parameters are the problem." She remembered writing that sentence. She had written it at 11 o'clock at night with Miguel's voice still warm in her ear, and the farmer's gash fresh in her memory, and the form with the request for additional documentation sitting in the corner of her vision. She had written it and looked at it for a moment, and then sent it before she could soften it. "So you came," she said. "I came to see for myself," he said, "whether the nurse who wrote that email was someone filing a grievance or someone who understood exactly what was broken and why it mattered." He looked at her. "Now I know," he said quietly. The clinic was very still around them. The fan turned slowly. The drawings taped to the wall moved slightly in the stirred air, the child's crayon nurse holding her crayon heart. Clara felt many things at once. The enormity of it. The man in the third chair from the window carrying an authority she had not imagined. The 6 years narrowing to a point and then widening out again into something that might lead somewhere different. The specific weight of being seen by someone with the power to act on what they saw. And beneath all of it, something she had not expected. Gratitude, yes, but also something that surprised her with its edge. 3 weeks, she said. He looked at her. "You received my email 3 weeks ago," she said. "You came here and sat in my waiting room for a week. You watched, you documented, you filled a notebook." Her voice was still calm, but something under it had sharpened. "Leonora came in 3 weeks ago and was sent away because she had no money for lab fees. She got worse for 3 weeks. She came back today." He was very still. "Gunnaman, I'm not saying your evaluation was wrong," she said. "I understand why you observe before you act. I understand why you needed to verify." She looked at him. "But 3 weeks is a long time when you are Leonora." The words landed. She had not meant them as a blow, only as a truth. And she watched them land in him the way truth lands in people who are capable of receiving it, not bouncing off, but going in. Something moved in his face, not defensiveness, not the practiced smoothness of a government official managing a difficult conversation. Something real and heavy and honest. "You're right," he said. The simplicity of it stopped her. "I've thought about that every day this week," he said. Whether observation had a cost, whether every day I sat and watched and documented was a day someone paid for the thing I was documenting. He looked down at the notebook. "There is no clean answer. If I had moved sooner, the report would be thinner. The case would be easier to dismiss, to explain away, to absorb without consequence. The longer I stayed, the fuller the record, the harder it becomes for anyone to call this an isolated incident or a misunderstanding." He paused. But you're right that the calculation is not mine to make alone. It belongs to Leonora, too. Clara picked up her pen again. Then make it count, she said. I intend to, he said. She went back to her letter. He went back to his notebook. They sat in the empty clinic in the evening light, the two of them, working in the same direction, and did not need to say anything else for a while. He stayed 2 more days. On the second of those days, Saturday, when the clinic was officially closed, and Clara was there anyway, catching up on documentation she had been unable to finish during the week, he came in at 8 in the morning and asked if she would show him the supply cabinet from the beginning. Every item, every shortage, every substitution she had made, every workaround she had developed for the gaps between what the clinic needed and what it received. She showed him all of it. She did not perform it. She did not make a case. She simply opened the cabinet and walked him through it the way she walked through it every morning, noting what was there and what wasn't, and what she was currently using instead, and what that cost in terms of second-best outcomes. He listened and wrote and occasionally asked a question so precise it made her look at him sideways. A question about cold chain maintenance, a question about the last calibration date on the blood pressure machine, a question about the oxygen concentrator in the corner, which she had been requesting a replacement part for since March. At one point she said, "The oxygen concentrator part. It's been 9 months." He wrote it down. 9 months, he said. If someone came in with acute respiratory distress, she said, and I needed to run that concentrator at full capacity for more than 20 minutes, I would lose it halfway through. He wrote that down too. He was quiet for a moment. Have you had to? Once, she said, 8 months ago. I managed with what I had and the patient survived and I drove him to Bagtas myself at 2 in the morning. She paused. I filed a critical incident report the next day. Do you have a copy? She went to the logbook and pulled it without needing to search. He held it. He read it slowly. He set it down on the table and looked at it lying there, and said nothing for a long time. Clara, he said finally. She waited. When this report goes to the secretary's desk, he said, things will move, quickly and with some noise. Vargas and the municipal health officer will be investigated. The supply chain failures will be reviewed. The billing discrepancies will go to the appropriate authorities. He looked at her. And this clinic will be looked at for what it is, not what the standard metrics say it is, what it actually is. She held his gaze. It is a clinic that has been kept alive by one person, he said, in conditions that should have been addressed years ago, who documented everything, treated everyone, turned no one away, and never stopped writing to people who weren't reading her. He paused. The secretary needs to understand that when a system is failing, sometimes the only thing standing between it and complete collapse is a single person with the right character. He needs to understand what that looks like. I'm going to show him. Clara looked at him for a moment. She thought of the drawing on the wall. Gracias, Ate Clara. She thought of Miguel's voice saying, you help a lot of them. Nanay, with the simple authority of a 9-year-old who believed things completely. She thought of Leonora and the 3 weeks and the expression on Nathan's face when she had told him the truth of it. She thought of her husband, who had died because there was no one close enough to help him in time. I don't want this to only be about what went wrong, she said carefully. The patients here. They built something with this clinic, even when the clinic wasn't building anything with them. They kept coming. They brought their children and their parents and their neighbors. They drew pictures and brought cake and called me Ate. What they built deserves to be seen too. Nathan looked at her. The searching expression was gone. He was not looking for anything anymore. He was looking at something he had already found and was holding carefully. It will be seen, he said. I promise you that. He left on a Sunday morning, just as the village was beginning to stir. He came by the clinic first, which was not yet open, and knocked. Clara opened the door with a half-finished cup of coffee in her hand. He handed her a card with a direct number written on the back. If anything changes before the investigation begins, he said, if Vargas comes back with a different approach now that he's been seen, if anyone in the regional office makes things difficult for you, you call this number. She took it. He held out his hand. She shook it. His grip was firm and his eyes said something his words had not. The particular look of a person who has been shown something they will not forget. The bread rolls, she said. The first morning. He blinked. Yes. You weren't sure how they'd land. I noticed. Something softened in his expression. And I wasn't sure if it was appropriate. I was still supposed to be just a patient. You brought coffee too, she said. Nobody brings coffee unless they want to stay a while. He smiled. It changed his face entirely, made him look like someone from whom the weight had briefly lifted. Take care of yourself, he said. Not just the clinic, yourself. Go file your report, she said. He walked to his car. Not a silver one, a plain one, unremarkable, the kind that fit into a village road without drawing attention. He drove away and the dust settled behind him, and Clara stood at the door of the clinic with her coffee and watched him go. She went inside. She unlocked the medicine cabinet. She stood there with the list in her mind, the 7 items, and she thought about what was coming and what it might mean and whether she could trust it. And then she turned around, sat at her desk, and opened the logbook to a fresh page. Monday's patients were already arriving. She picked up her pen. The first sign that something had changed came on a Wednesday. Not a Tuesday, not one of Dr. Vargas's days. A Wednesday, which had always been a day that belonged entirely to Clara, to the ordinary rhythm of the clinic without the particular tension his presence introduced. She had learned to appreciate Wednesdays, the way you appreciate weather that asks nothing of you. This Wednesday was different. She was in the middle of changing the wound dressing on old Rudy's hand, a new one this time from a wire fence he had not seen in the dark, when she heard a car outside. Not Dr. Vargas's silver car, which she could identify by the sound of its particular engine, the way you can identify a person by the sound of their footstep. This was a different sound. 2 cars, actually, one behind the other. Rudy craned his neck toward the window. Government plates, he said. Clara kept her hands steady on the dressing. Hold still, she said. The front door opened. A young woman in a collared shirt and slacks with a briefcase and a clipboard stood in the doorway and looked at the waiting room with the expression of someone who had been told what to expect and found the reality both better and worse simultaneously. Nurse Mendoza, she said. One moment, Clara said, finishing the dressing, taping it, telling Rudy to keep it dry for 3 days, and walking out to the waiting room with her hands still slightly gloved. There were 3 of them, and to the young woman with the clipboard, a man in his 50s with a name badge from the Commission on Audit, and a second woman who introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Santos, Regional Director, Office of the Secretary of Health. Not District 4, not the regional office that had been swallowing her emails. The Secretary's office directly. Clara peeled off her gloves. I was told to expect a visit, she said, though not this soon. Dr. Santos looked at her with the expression of someone who had read something carefully and was now reading the person behind it. The Undersecretary filed his report 8 days ago, she said. It was on the Secretary's desk within the hour. We've been moving since then. What happens now, Clara said. Now, Dr. Santos said, opening her own folder, we start the formal documentation process. And we'll need access to your logs, your supply records, and your incident reports. We'll also need to speak with your regular patients, those who are willing, about their experiences with the clinic. From the waiting room, Lolo Fermin cleared his throat. I am willing, he said. Clara looked at him. He was sitting in the second chair from the window, which had been his chair for as long as she had been here, with his hands on his knees and his chin at an angle that said he had been waiting for someone official to walk through this door for longer than he could say, and he was not going to waste the moment. I am also willing, said Nana from the third chair. And I, said a woman in the back whose name was Cora, who had been coming to the clinic for her daughter's asthma management for 3 years. Dr. Santos looked at the room, and she looked at the people in the cracked chairs, and then at Clara standing at the desk with the worn logbook open behind her, and the bent drawer that still wouldn't close, and the child's drawing taped to the wall. Something moved in her expression. Not pity, the older thing, the one Nathan had also carried. We have a lot to document, she said quietly. I've been documenting it for 6 years, Clara said. Everything you need is already here. The days that followed had a quality Clara had never experienced in this clinic before. A denseness to them, like the air before rain. Things moved that had not moved in years. Phones rang, people arrived and departed. Boxes were opened, records were photographed. Diana, conversations were held in low voices at the table in the second examination room that had previously only held sick people and their quiet worries. The audit team spent 2 days on the billing records. On the afternoon of the second day, the senior auditor, the man with the Commission on Audit badge, came to Clara's desk with a face that had settled into an expression she recognized as the professional version of fury. He set a printed page in front of her. "This is the billing record for the last 18 months, he said, "cross-referenced against your attendance log." She looked at it. She had done the same calculation herself, informally, in the back pages of her notebook, on a night when she could not sleep. She had not let herself look at the number directly because she had known the number would make her angry in a way she could not easily contain. She looked at it now. 43 days, billed as present, full consultation hours, against a logbook that showed departure before noon, or arrival after 1, or in 6 separate instances, no arrival at all, with a notation in Clara's handwriting that said Dr. Vargas did not attend. Patients seen by Nurse Mendoza. She had written those notations. She had written them carefully and completely because something in her had understood, even then, that they were not only records, they were witnesses. "I have all the originals," she said. "Every page." "I know," he said. "I've been reading them." He looked at her. "What, you kept the most thorough records I've seen from a rural facility in 20 years of this work." "I kept them because I didn't know who would eventually read them," she said. "I only knew that if something was going to change, someone would need to see it clearly." He nodded. He picked up the page and went back to the examination room. Clara sat at her desk for a moment in the brief quiet between patients. She thought of the form that had come back from the regional office asking for additional documentation. She thought of the email chain with 12 messages and 12 silences. She thought of every time she had written something down and filed it and watched it disappear into a system that seemed designed to absorb everything without response. She thought of a man in a pale blue shirt sitting in the third chair from the window, writing in a notebook that was filling up faster than she could follow. She thought of Nathan and his worn shoes and his bread rolls from the Sorry Sorry store, and the way he had said, "I know," when she told him the clinic had not been the right shape for a long time. She thought of Leonora. She picked up her pen. She had 4 patients waiting. She called the first name. On the 9th day, Dr. Vargas came, not on a Tuesday, not in his silver car, which arrived clean no matter how muddy the road. He arrived on a Thursday morning in a different car that belonged to the municipal health officer, his cousin, and there were 2 other men in the car whose posture suggested legal counsel. Clara saw them park from the window of the second examination room. She was in the middle of a consultation. She finished it. She walked out, wrote her notes, called the next patient, and did not change her pace. Vargas came through the door at 10:15. He was dressed carefully, more carefully than he dressed for clinic days, in a dark suit with a pressed collar, the clothes of a man who understood he was appearing before something that required presentation. His face was the face she had seen before, professionally composed, the annoyance running underneath like groundwater, not visible but felt. He looked at the room, at the audit team's papers still spread on the table in the examination room, at the 2 women from the secretary's office who had been working at the desk for 4 days, at Clara. "I need to speak with you," he said. "I'm with a patient," she said. "When you're finished." She was with patients for 2 more hours. He waited. She had not asked him to wait. She had not offered him a chair. He stood near the door with the 2 legal men behind him and his cousin, the municipal health officer, beside him, and the waiting room watched him stand there with the patient, unhurried attention of people who had been in this room many times and understood what they were looking at. Lolo Fermin was there. He came every Tuesday and also now on Thursdays, apparently, which was new, and he sat in his chair with his hands on his knees and his chin at its angle, and looked at Dr. Vargas with the gentle implacability of a man in his 80s who had decided that his remaining time was too valuable to spend on pretending things were other than what they were. Nana was there. Cora was there with her daughter. Were 3 other patients Clara did not recognize who had come for the first time that week. Word having moved through the village in the way that word moved in small places, not loudly but completely, arriving in every corner before the official announcement. They looked at Dr. Vargas. He did not look back at them. He looked at the wall above the reception desk. He looked at the child's drawing. Gracias, ate Clara. She watched him look at it. She watched something move in his face that was not conscience exactly, but was perhaps the outermost edge of what conscience looks like in a person who has spent a long time keeping it at a distance. At 12:30, Clara walked the last patient to the door and turned. Dr. Vargas, she said. Dr. Santos had come out of the examination room. The auditor had come with her. They stood at the edge of the waiting room in the quiet, particular way of people with authority who have learned not to deploy it loudly. Dr. Vargas looked at them, then at Clara, then at the room full of people who were still, every one of them, sitting in their chairs. I want to clarify some issues, he said, regarding the audit findings. I believe there are contextual factors that the documentation doesn't fully capture. The patient volume at this clinic has always been manageable. The supply shortages were a regional issue, not a local one. Any billing irregularities are a result of an outdated recording system, not intentional misrepresentation. He said all of this looking at Dr. Santos. Dr. Santos waited until he was done. The billing irregularities, she said, represent 43 separate instances over 18 months. The supply requests represent 11 formal written communications, all documented, all unanswered, in a chain that has been traced back to your cousin's office, where they were flagged as low priority. She did not raise her voice. The audit findings are not a draft for discussion. They've already been submitted. Vargas's jaw tightened. He looked at Clara. You did this, he said. I documented my work, Clara said. I've been doing that for 6 years. You think this makes you a hero? The professional composure was thinning at the edges now, the genuine anger beginning to show the way a bone shows through skin. You think because some official from the city sat in your waiting room for a week, that everything you've been doing here becomes suddenly important. You're a nurse in a barrio clinic. You stamp forms and take temperatures, and you are replaceable. The room was completely silent, not the silence of absence, the silence of presence. Every person in that room was there inside it, holding it steady. Lola Fermin looked at Dr. Vargas. He said nothing. He did not need to. His 83 years said it for him, the weight of a person who has watched things be called by wrong names for long enough to recognize when someone is doing it again. Nena looked at Dr. Vargas. Cora looked at Dr. Vargas. The child beside Cora, 8 years old with the matter-of-fact clarity that children bring to things adults have learned to complicate, looked at Dr. Vargas and then at Clara and said, in a voice that carried, "Why is he angry at Ate Clara?" Nobody answered her. Nobody needed to. The question itself was the answer. Doctor. De Vargas looked at the room of people looking at him. He looked at the drawing on the wall. He looked at Clara standing at her desk in her uniform, her logbook open, her hands at her sides, her face still and steady and entirely unimpressed. He said nothing more. He left. The 2 legal men followed. His cousin, the municipal health officer, paused at the door and looked back once at Dr. Santos. Dr. Santos looked at him with an expression that suggested she had read his file too, and then looked away. He left. The door closed. For a moment, the waiting room was still. Then Lolo Fermin said, to no one in particular, "He parked in the shade again. He always parks in the shade." He shook his head. No shame. Someone laughed. Then someone else. Then the room released the breath it had been holding, and the ordinary sounds of people returned. The shifting of chairs, the murmur of voices, someone asking if the nurse was available now, and Clara looking up and saying yes, who's next, and the morning continuing. Nathan Reyes called 2 weeks later. She was at the end of a long day, her shoes off, her feet on the floor, the logbook in her lap, writing the last entries of the evening. The phone rang and his name appeared on the screen, and she answered it with the particular calm of someone who had been half expecting it. "How are you?" he said. "The same," she said. "More the same than I was. Some things have shifted." "I heard about Thursday," he said. "Dr. Santos told me." "It wasn't dramatic," Clara said. "It was just people being looked at honestly." "That's the most dramatic thing there is," he said. She thought about that. 21. The contract termination was finalized this morning, he said. "Vargas. And the municipal health officer has been referred for a separate investigation. It will take time to resolve fully, but the foundation is in place. The report went to the secretary with a recommendation for immediate corrective action. He paused. He read it the same evening it arrived. He said it was the most comprehensive documentation of systemic failure in a rural facility he had seen in his tenure. What does corrective action look like? Clara said. That's what I'm calling about. A pause. The clinic will be reclassified from level 1 to level 2 facility based on actual patient load, not projected. That means a larger supply budget, a permanent physician position with proper terms and oversight, and a facility upgrade allocation. He paused again. The secretary also wants to discuss the clinic directly. He's coming to San Isidro. Clara was quiet for a moment. Here, she said. Next Friday, he said. Unannounced officially. But I'm telling you. Why? Because you should be able to prepare. Not by cleaning anything up or making it look different than it is. Just, he stopped. I told him it was a place where the truth was visible in every corner. I want him to see it that way. She looked around the room, the bent drawer, the drawn heart on the wall, the vaccination chart. He'll see it as it is, she said. Good, he said. And then quieter. Clara, the oxygen concentrator part, it was shipped this morning. It will arrive before the end of the week. Something moved in her throat that she did not entirely expect. Such a small thing, a part for a machine. The kind of thing that should have arrived 9 months ago, that should never have required an undersecretary to carry to the secretary's attention. Such a small, specific, ordinary thing. Thank you, she said. It should have been there in March, he said. Yes, she agreed. It should have. A pause. I owe you something else, he said. A more direct apology than the one I gave in the clinic. For Leonora. For 3 weeks. You gave a good apology in the clinic, she said. I want to give a better one. Then do better next time, she said. File faster. Trust the documentation sooner. The women in rural clinics who have been writing to your office for years have already done the work of proof. They just need someone to read it. A long silence. You should work for us, he said. I work for my patients, she said. And that's the same thing, if you do your job right. She heard something on the line that might have been a laugh and might have been something softer. Good night, Nurse Mendoza, he said. Good night, she said. She set down the phone and finished her logbook entries and sat for a moment in the clinic that had been her world for 6 years, which was the same as it had always been, and also quietly, permanently different. The secretary came on a Friday. He was younger than she had expected from his photographs, mid-50s, with the kind of face that had been formed by paying attention to things for a long time. He came with a small team and without cameras. He came the way Nathan had come, quietly in a car that did not announce itself, parking on the road and walking to the door like someone who had somewhere to be and knew how to find it. Nathan was with him. Nathan was in the same clothes, or ones like them. Plain trousers, a collared shirt, his notebook under his arm. He looked at Clara when he came through the door with the expression of someone returning to a place that had mattered to them. She nodded at him. He nodded back. No performance. Just recognition between two people who had said what needed to be said. The secretary moved through the clinic slowly. He looked at everything the way Nathan had looked at everything, the kind of looking that intends to remember. He looked at the cracked chairs and the bent drawer, and the child's drawing, and the vaccination chart. He looked at the supply cabinet, the new medication stock that had arrived after the audit, even in the empty slot where the oxygen concentrator had sat with its damaged part for 9 months and now sat repaired, humming quietly, ready. He looked at the logbook, not just the recent pages but the old ones, running his thumb across the edge of the filled years. He met Lolo Fermin, who had come on a Friday for no documented medical reason and was sitting in his chair. He met Nana. He met Cora and her daughter. He met a young man who had come in that morning with a fever and who looked slightly startled to find himself in the same room as a cabinet minister, but accepted it with the practicality of someone who had learned that this clinic was the kind of place where ordinary things happen, alongside extraordinary ones, and both were treated with the same steady attention. He spoke with each of them, not the speaking of a politician reading a room, the speaking of a person who wanted to understand something and had the patience to listen until he did. At the end of the morning, he sat across from Clara at the reception desk. Nathan sat to the side. The rest of the team waited outside. The Undersecretary's report described this clinic as a facility that has been sustained by exceptional individual character in the near-total absence of institutional support, the Secretary said. I've been trying to understand what that looks like in practice. I think I understand now. Clara said nothing. I want to ask you something, he said, and I want you to answer honestly, not diplomatically. I don't know how to answer diplomatically, she said. I've been writing direct emails for 6 years. Something in his eyes warmed. What does this clinic need? Not what the standard reallocation covers? What does it actually need? She had thought about this question for 6 years without being asked it. She had the answer ready not because she had prepared it, but because it lived in her, the way the names of her patients lived in her. A permanent doctor, she said, one who chose this, not assigned, not contracted, not passing through. Someone who decided that 2,000 people in a farming village matter as much as the patients in a city clinic, because they do. The same medications available in city health centers, because the children here get the same ear infections. She paused. A school health program. Half my pediatric load comes from conditions that would be caught earlier if someone was looking at these children regularly, or not just when they're already sick. She paused again. And the other 2 clinics in this district, not just this one, all 3 of us have been holding the same weight with the same gaps. Fix the system, not just the clinic that happened to have someone filing reports. The Secretary looked at her for a long moment. Nathan told me you would say that last part, he said. Then he was listening, she said. He was, the Secretary said. He leaned forward. The reclassification is approved. The facility upgrade allocation is confirmed. We're opening a competitive application for a permanent physician position here, with a salary structure designed to attract people who want to be here, not just people who need a placement. He paused. The other 2 clinics in the district are also being reviewed. When your documentation is being used as the template for what a rural facility's records should look like, we're developing a training module for it. Clara looked at him. The school health program, he said, is going to take longer, budget cycles, but I'm directing my office to include San Isidro and the 2 neighboring barangays in the pilot for next year's rural health program expansion. He paused. And I want to tell you something personally. She waited. Your 11th email, he said. The one that reached my office by accident, the one that said the expected parameters were the problem. He looked at her steadily. That sentence has been in my head since Nathan put the report on my desk. I've been saying it in meetings. I said it to the regional directors last week. I want it on the wall of our office. He paused. And I want to know if you'd be willing to work with us on a review of rural health standards. Not leave the clinic. Work with us from here. Help us understand what the gap looks like from where you're standing. Clara was quiet for a moment. She thought about Miguel, about calling him tonight at 7, about the homework he would hold up on the screen that she would pretend to read, about the 6 weeks she had not seen him, about the father he had lost because there was no one close enough in time. The clinic still needs full-time coverage, she said. You'll have support staff within 60 days, he said. A community health worker to start, then the physician. You won't be alone. She looked at the drawing on the wall, the crayon nurse with the crayon heart. She thought about all the things she had done alone. Not bitterly, just clearly. Not with the way you look at a long road you have already walked, understanding finally that it was as long as it was. All right, she said. The weeks that followed settled into something Clara did not entirely have a word for. Not easy, not suddenly simple, but different. Changed in the specific ways that real change comes, not all at once. Not with music, but in the arrival of small concrete things. The oxygen concentrator humming correctly, the amoxicillin present in the cabinet when she opened it. A community health worker named Joy, who arrived on a Monday morning with a bag and a willingness so earnest it made Clara feel something she had forgotten, which was the particular gratitude of not being the only person in the room. The new physician came in the 6th week. She was 31 years old, nice, small and quick, with the kind of directness that suggested she had decided what she was doing with her life and was not interested in debating it. Her name was Dr. Ana Bautista, and she had trained in Manila and turned down a position at a private hospital to apply for this clinic, a fact that the municipal health officer's replacement mentioned to Clara as if it were unusual. It's not unusual, Clara said. People who choose this kind of work are the right people. We just haven't been making it possible for them. Dr. Bautista arrived at the clinic at 7:30 on her first morning, 45 minutes early. Clara was already there. She was always already there. But she looked up when she heard the early footstep, and something in her chest moved. Not surprise exactly. Recognition. On the sound of someone who had decided that this place mattered enough to arrive for before it asked them to. Nurse Mendoza, Dr. Bautista said at the door. "Eight Clara," Clara said. "Please." Dr. Bautista smiled. "Eight Clara." Clara made coffee. There was enough for two. Leonora came back the following month for her regular check. Her blood pressure was controlled. Her kidney function had stabilized. She had the labs done at the clinic now, the portable testing unit having been part of the supply upgrade, and she sat in the chair while Clara reviewed the results with the same attention she had always brought, which was to say complete, which was to say the kind that noticed not just the numbers, but the person behind them. "You look better," Clara said. "I feel better," Leonora said. And she looked at the room, at the new chairs, 4 of them, replacing the worst of the cracked ones, at the vaccination chart on the wall, updated now, at the medication cabinet through the open door, full in the way it had not been full for years. "It's different," she said. "Some things are," Clara said. Leonora looked at her. "Was it you? Did you do this?" Clara thought about Nathan in the third chair from the window, writing in a notebook that filled up faster than she could follow. She thought about the secretary leaning forward and asking the question she had been waiting 6 years for someone to ask. She thought about the auditor with his billing records and Dr. Santos with her folder, and Joy arriving at 7 with her willingness, and Dr. Bautista at 7:30 with her coffee already ready. She thought about Lolo Fermin saying, "And I am willing." It was a lot of people, Clara said. Someone saw what was happening here and decided it mattered. And then other people decided too. And then things moved. Leonora reached across and put her hand over Clara's on the desk. "But you kept the light on," she said, "while all the rest were deciding." Clara looked at her. She thought about that, about the specific quality of keeping a light on, about what it cost and what it meant, and whether the cost and the meaning were separable or whether they were, at the end of it, the same thing. "My mother used to say that," she said. "What did she say?" "She said there are people who keep the light on for others." Clara paused. "She said the world runs on them, whether the world notices or not." Leonora squeezed her hand once. "It noticed," she said. When Miguel came for his first visit to the clinic, it was on a Saturday in the school holidays. Clara having finally, actually, taken a day that was not available for emergencies or reorders or incident reports. He was taller than she expected. Children do that. They grow in the weeks you are not watching them, as if trying to catch up to the version of themselves you are going to meet next. He stood in the doorway of the clinic and looked at everything with his father's eyes, dark and quick and full of something that had not yet been disappointed by the world. "This is it," he said. "This is it," she said. He walked in slowly, the way people walk into places they have heard about many times and are now comparing to the version in their mind. He looked at the chairs, the cabinet, at the examination rooms, the fan that turned slowly in the corner, the drawing on the wall. He stopped at the drawing. "Gracias a te Clara," he read. "A little girl drew it," Clara said. "She was 4 years old. She came in very sick. She got better." He looked at it for a long time. Then he turned and looked at his mother, and his expression was the expression of someone who has understood something they had been told before, but are only now understanding. The specific shift of a thing moving from information to knowledge. "You did that," he said. "You made her better." "I caught it in time," Clara said. "That's different." "Nane," he said, with the simple authority of a 9-year-old who believed things completely. "That's the same thing." She looked at her son. She thought about his father. Freya about the night they had driven 3 hours because there was no one close enough. About the clinic that should have been there and was not. About the clinic she had come to because she had decided, with the quiet force of a person who has turned grief into direction, that it would not happen to someone else's family in this place. She thought about Nathan in his plain shirt and his worn shoes, writing in his notebook in the third chair from the window. She thought about Leonora and the 3 weeks, and what had been paid by being slow, and what had been built by finally being seen. She thought about Dr. Bautista at 7:30 with coffee for two, about Joy arriving with her willingness every morning, about Lolo Fermi in his chair, about the oxygen concentrator, humming. She thought about her mother, who had told her about the tired that sleep cannot fix, who had also told her about the light that certain people keep burning for others, who had said with the particular wisdom of mothers who have seen enough of the world to understand its deeper logic, that goodness given always finds its way back. Not because it is owed, not because the world is fair, but because the world in its deepest structure cannot let certain things go unseen forever. Mama was right about that. She is right about most things eventually. The world runs on the people who show up in the broken places and do not leave, who write the 11th email when 10 have gone unanswered, who sit in the clinic at 6 in the morning and call the last message on the overnight line, who hold a baby so its mother can stop shaking long enough to sign a form, who notice a stranger in a clinic chair and bring them medicine and water and their full attention, not because of what the stranger might be, but because a person in a clinic chair is a person who needs care. Clara had done all of it without knowing who was watching. She had done it because her husband died in a place that did not have what he needed, and she had come to fill that gap. And she had filled it every day for 6 years with her hands and her voice and her logbook and her 11 emails, and the specific, bright, stubborn fire of a woman who believes that 2,000 people in a farming village deserve exactly what any other 2,000 people deserve. She did not do it to be rewarded. She did not do it to be seen. She did it because a man she loved had looked at her once with quick dark eyes and believed things completely, and she had decided to be worthy of that belief every day for the rest of her life. The reward came anyway. It came in the shape of a man in a pale blue shirt sitting in the third chair from the window with a notebook and a question he already knew the answer to. It came in the shape of an oxygen concentrator part arriving, in the shape of a young doctor at the door at 7:30, in a phone call at 7 from a child holding up his homework, in a hand placed over hers on the desk by a woman who said, "You kept the light on." Mama told me once that the things we do quietly, without audience, without expectation, are the ones that end up mattering loudest. She told me that a person who does right in a small place is doing something that reaches further than they know. She told me that the world has a way of eventually putting a light on what was kept in the dark, and when it does, the light is not an arrival. It is a recognition of what was always there. She was talking about women like Clara. She was always talking about women like Clara. Miguel stood in the clinic and looked at the drawing on the wall. His mother stood beside him. The fan turned slowly. The medicine cabinet was full. In the second examination room, the oxygen concentrator hummed its steady working hum. Outside, the village moved through it Saturday morning, and somewhere down the road a rooster was being answered by a closer one. And 2,000 people went about their lives in the way that people go about their lives when there is someone nearby who has decided, quietly and without ceremony, one that they will not be left without care. Clara put her arm around her son. He leaned against her. "Can I see the room?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Can I sit in one of the chairs?" "You can sit in any of them," she said. "The new ones are sturdier." "What about that one?" He pointed at the third chair from the window. She looked at it, at the specific angle of the afternoon light on it, at the empty surface of the seat where a man in plain clothes had sat for a week with a notebook filling up and a question he had come a long way to answer. "That one too," she said. He went and sat in it. He sat with his hands on his knees and his chin at a small angle, looking at the room the way people look at things they want to remember exactly as they are. Wyatt and Clara stood at the desk and watched her son in the clinic she had built out of 6 years of showing up. And the light came through the window and lay across the floor in the way that light does when it has no appointment to keep and nowhere else to be. She would call him tonight, she thought. Not tonight, he was here. Tomorrow. She would call Nathan, not to report anything, just to say that the concentrator was still humming, that Leonora's numbers were good, that a 9-year-old had sat in the third chair from the window and decided, with the absolute authority of someone who believes things completely, that catching something in time and making it better were the same thing. She thought Nathan would want to know that. She thought he would write it in his notebook. She hoped he would. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. Mom always said the people who stay for the whole story are the ones who understand it. If it moved you, I think you'll find the other videos on your screen are waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come home. There's always a story waiting at Mama Told Me.